Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the second session of CogX FinTech and Future Financial Services. The second session is in conversation with OakNorth. OakNorth having made the headlines and created some amazing success and traction. And we're going to first invite the first speaker, which is Tunde Olanrewaju, and I really pray that I got that pronunciation right, to join us. Tunde, are you there? Please join us.
Yes, I am.
Okay, there he is. Great. Come on, how good or how bad was that pronunciation?
You nailed it, actually. I've had it mangled many times, so
I
good
didn't
job.
practice at all. No, but it's terrific. Tunde, thank you very much for joining us. Quickly tell us a little bit about who you are and where you work.
So hi, everyone. My name is Tunde. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey & Company based here in London. I lead McKinsey's digital practice in the UK, and I also lead our fintech practice across Europe.
Thank you. And now our next speaker is Shawn Hunter. Shawn Hunter, please join us in the show.
Hi there.
Hey,
Hi.
Shawn. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Shawn, you're from OakNorth. Please tell us what you do at OakNorth.
Hi, I'm Shawn Hunter. I'm the CIO of OakNorth, and I was the first employee in the platform side of the business when we first started it.
The CIO. I mean, no pressure, mate. That's it. You see, you got so much on your plate with such a rapidly growing business. Well, look, I'm going to leave it to the two of you to have a fireside chat. When this is done, hopefully you will be able to go into a Q&A session and answer questions from some of the audience. But I'll be back at that point just to help you finish off and make sure everybody goes to where they need to be. Have a great session. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, that's brilliant. Shawn, very good to see you as always.
Nice to see you, Tunde.
How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So Shawn, the way I'm going to run the chat, obviously we'll keep it quite free-flowing, but I was going to really go through 3 or 4 topics. The first one is just to talk about the immediate crisis and the shutdown, how that's affecting you and the broader business, and then to turn to how you're adapting for that, and some of the advice you have for others as they cope with the unprecedented shifts that we're seeing. And then thirdly, just maybe some kind of big strategic moves that you might be considering. We'll see how much you can share through the course of the discussion.
Great.
And maybe as we go through, I'll intersperse it with some of the research that we have been doing around what might happen in this crisis and try and just bring it to life. So maybe just on the first one around the crisis impact. There are 2 things that have really struck me, at least when I look at what's going to happen. The first one is around what's going to happen to the banking industry, and the second one is around the fintech space. So specifically on the banking industry, it's pretty clear that a lot of loans are being made right now. At least one of the clients I've spoken to have probably done about 2 years worth of lending in 2 months, right? It's clear that many of these companies are going to struggle to pay it back. So we can expect that towards the back end of this year, there'll be a lot of banks declaring more and more risk cost issues. So basically non-performing loans. Then on top of that, there'll be less companies to lend to. And then you've got very low interest rates. So I think banking industry revenues seem very, very challenged from where we're sitting. And I'd love to kind of get your take on it. And for, the bank aspect of your overall business, what are you seeing? The second one is around fintechs, right? And then I'll let you respond. Around fintechs and frankly, how much the funding environment has shifted. So lots of, VCs aren't basically putting the funds to work as they have been, as we look at it as well, given the drop in the broader financial markets. Many people whose funds were putting money into alternatives can't put the same because as a proportion of their lending or of their investments, it becomes too big. So VCs aren't going to have as much capital to deploy, or they're going to have to stretch what they have longer. So again, how is that affecting you? I think you are in a relatively strong position with the amount you've raised previously, but I'd just love to get some color. So those 2 topics.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right that bank or financial services profitability generally is going to be challenged for a while. We're lucky in that we are a profitable bank, and I think the way we've managed to become profitable is by sort of sticking to what we're good at, finding a niche and sort of following that seam as much as possible. And I think, people who have got a distinctive offering are still going to, probably find opportunities, but I think it's going to be tough. And There will be loan losses across the industry in general. I think the issue that you mentioned of sort of a lot of lending and rates going down is sort of structurally very, very hard for the industry to deal with. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. I think on the VCs and funding thing, I think VCs are probably going to sort of choose their bullets more carefully, and I think fintechs need to respond to the changing environment. We saw a while back before the crisis a kind of shift from these companies with very capital intensive business models that need kind of a ton of money to hit profitable unit economics, and then we're looking for sort of IPO exit while still unprofitable. I think that kind of thing is going to be very out of favor in the new world. I think that investors are going to be looking for proven business models, and things where fintechs have already demonstrated they can make the unit economics work before they kind of back it a lot for exit. And so I think that's going to change which companies get invested in and so on quite a lot.
Got it. And so, I mean, just to pivot to your particular area. So you were previously a Palantir before you came over to OakNorth. So when you think about some of the data capabilities that you had used previously and how they're helping you and at OakNorth to respond to some of the issues in the crisis, can you bring that to life for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you look at any large enterprise, and it's not only financial services, any large enterprises, one of their key strategic challenges is data. They all have tons of data. They don't know how to use it effectively, and they struggle to use data to make good decisions. And I think, what Palantir sort of does is help large enterprises make sense of all this data. And, sort of in terms of, so thematically, that's definitely what we've tried to do at OakNorth, but specifically targeted at this vertical of lending. And in particular mid-market loans to mid-market businesses, and I think it's very challenging for a large bank. They've got so much data, and yet the data is very sort of siloed. It's not in useful formats. It's very difficult to even make basic analytical results which join it all together is very, very challenging actually. So what we try to do is help organizations do two things. The one is join together their internal data, and then secondly, join that internal data onto the world of external data so that we can help them make good credit decisions. And sort of at its heart, that's the technical challenge we're trying to solve.
Got it. And I mean, let's talk about that a bit more, because in the world we're in now, your past experience of a company has got nothing really to do with the future, right? Because we're in unprecedented economic territory. So, when you talk about this external insight, can you just help us understand how that helps you help your clients do different lending?
Right. So let's just drill into that in a second. Like, even if a bank has kind of, got good access to their own internal underwriting data and so on, all the information they had is based on assumptions which are no longer valid in the new world. So you absolutely need to be able to use external data in order to make good decisions, because your data that you get from borrowers probably doesn't even reflect the crisis at all yet, or only just the very early stage. Now, using external data allows you to drill into how a particular sector is performing, how, what the differentiation in that sector is, and start to make sense of what a business might be facing, because it varies. How the crisis has impacted people varies enormously by sector. An example would be, say you've got a mid-market pizza chain, right? So during the crisis, maybe they had to shut down their in-dining, but their delivery service was going well, probably even more delivery than usual, right? However, by contrast, if you have a Michelin star fine dining restaurant, they would have to completely shut down during the lockdown phase. But post-lockdown, with social distancing, your Michelin star restaurant might be back to almost normal, because they're used to a very long turnaround time between customers. They already have a lot of space between tables, so social distancing probably is not a problem. Their standards of hygiene are probably exceptionally good anyway, so any new hygiene regulations aren't going to be onerous. Versus it might take a while for your mid-market pizza restaurant for their in-dining business to recover, because all those additional measures are going to be very, very difficult for them to implement. And so you need the external data to make sense of all this stuff, because basically none of the information that a bank has internally is helpful at all at the moment.
Very, very helpful. So I think that takes us to another topic, which is moving forward in this crisis. So I've seen the news that OakNorth has been relatively fast in actually supporting clients in the US to respond to some of the new schemes that the government has launched. So what we are kind of terming the COVID pivot, right? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing lots of examples of new propositions that actually are really, really right for the times. Can you just bring to life how you managed to do that? I mean, you're in lockdown. I can imagine that the engineering team had other priorities. For other fintechs out there trying to think about how to be agile and respond nimbly, just bring to life what that entailed.
Yeah, so I mean, there's sort of three main things we've done for the US, and it's been incredibly effective. So the first thing is, in the US, the government announced this PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, which was an immediate, very short-term program to help businesses make payroll. And we went from the Paycheck Protection Program being announced to having a V0 live with a customer in 10 days. It was an incredibly intensive period, so I think a lot of people got no sleep for those 10 days at all. But basically, it allowed us to very rapidly take something to market and help our customers, because customers were very operationally challenged because the terms of the program were very unclear. And we've heard of banks where literally everyone right up to the chief risk officer was processing borrower applications. So we've got banks, it's insane. So they were working 24-hour shifts to just try and manually meet the demand. What we did is we created a product capability, which was an extension of our existing product to deal with this one thing. And then we built on that for the Main Street program, which is a more substantive program in that banks still keep some risk. And so banks are a little bit more nervous because they're actually having to make a full underwrite in a very, very short period of time. And that taught us a lot, because I think one of the things about this type of situation is it gives you an incredible ability to go through the full cycle of, building something, getting it into market, seeing what happens, learning from that, improving it very, very rapidly. And because banks are actually willing, because they have to move much faster than traditionally they were capable of. And we've seen that in a few different ways. And then the final thing is, for our bank in the UK, we developed a framework for assessing COVID vulnerability and how businesses are responding to the crisis and so on, and who needs additional help. And that program, we've sort of gradually, as the crisis evolved, we've adapted it and rolled it out further. And now we're offering it as a portfolio diagnostic tool to people who aren't even existing OakNorth customers. So it can be the first thing they do is just a full screen of their portfolio. And so that's been very powerful. And it's just really helped us to bring new things to market and get them validated by the market very, very rapidly.
And Shawn, how did you actually get your teams to kind of connect around this vision and get productive? I mean, 10 days, it takes, some large institutions that long just to get around an idea, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, so we try to hire people who like to run towards the sound of gunfire, so we try to hire people who like a challenge. It's been, but, there's a lot of operational things. Moving fast is very exciting for a period. You can't sustain it forever. But we try to be nimble anyway. We normally release software every week. So we're our basic infrastructure is set up to move fast. I think banks and lots of large institutions really struggle just because the basic machine has got so much inertia that, like, when you try and give it a shove, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. So again, just to come back to the bank for a second. So you've got the bank, which is obviously in this crisis also exposed to a lot of the things we just described around COVID affecting borrowers. And then you've got your platform business, which is giving people the capabilities to lend and kind of see what's going on with the mid-co. How do you think about the two businesses over this cycle? You know, what kind of stresses are you seeing and opportunities?
Yeah. So, I mean, firstly, we're very, very fortunate to have both the bank and the platform business because it gives us an incredible insight. When we speak to banks, as a platform person, when I speak to banks, I kind of know what it is to be a bank, deal with regulators, all that kind of stuff. So I understand, I have a unique insight, which a lot of fintechs probably would struggle to have in terms of the challenges of a large institution or a sort of regulated institution. And I think specifically right now, the way in which the platform and the bank are working together is, you know, our bank is very nimble for a bank, but obviously it's still regulated and so on. But it's meant that because the bank came to us and said, hey, look, we need to go through every borrower and figure out, you know, who's going to be vulnerable, how much capital they need now, how much they're going to need to reboot their business, how they would be affected by different periods of lockdown, all these things. And because our bank was asking us these questions, you know, we realized, hey, probably actually every bank needs this. And so
Got it.
It's really been fantastic from an idea generation perspective. And it means we can, you know, turn something around very, very rapidly, try it out in our own bank, and then see, okay, what would it take to do this for an external customer? And that's been very powerful for us.
And so if we think about the other fintechs who are watching this, right, you know, if I synthesize what you've been saying, on one hand, you're not immune to the crisis, right? Your bank is going to suffer the same kind of challenges. But however, you've been more effective at figuring out what your data can tell you and bringing in external data that can help you decide the right actions to take. You've also pivoted into the crisis. You've seen opportunities to make your proposition more relevant, right? So now you still have in this crisis to go and talk to banks. Banks themselves are immensely busy dealing with this crisis. How are you getting mind share? How are you getting attention, right? What are you seeing to, if you will, the sales cycles? Because for many fintechs out there that are B2B, this is really, really challenging.
Yeah, so it's really had a kind of polarizing effect on the sales cycle, if you like. So there's this enormous barbell of things which have just been punted right into the long grass because they're not part of the immediate firefight, and things which have been accelerated very radically. And so I think we've seen our sales cycle really contract because everyone realizes, hey, actually we need data-driven credit insights really badly now. And so, you know, projects where a bank previously might have said, actually, you know, maybe we can develop this ourselves, you know, give it 2.5 years, etc. Now they've said, actually, we really need a partner to work with because we need a solution immediately. So that's been very positive for us. I think how you get mind share is you as a fintech, you can't do everything. Institutions are huge and they need a ton of stuff. So how you get mind share is narrow down and be super focused on something you're really good at and where you have genuine expertise that you can bring something to a partnership. So even if you go to a really big bank, you actually have something special that they'll want to talk to you about. Whereas I think, you know, a lot of fintechs, or certainly in my experience when we started, we tried to be too broad. We tried to offer everything because we thought, hey, you know, one size fits all solution would be great. But in actual practice, like narrowing down to something that's really, really punchy is much more, has much greater impact.
Right. Focus, effectively.
Right.
Yeah. So the other final topic I want to talk to is around M&A. So at least from where we're sitting, we look at the fintech landscape and some of the numbers we've run, we can clearly see that the aggregate funding that will be required to fund fintechs that currently exist that are actually reasonably successful through this crisis is not going to be met by the VC space. It's just not going to happen. Also, many of the business models that were reliant on user growth as opposed to profitable growth, we think are very, very challenged. So we think there's a wave of M&A and consolidation that's likely to happen, right? Is this something you're observing? Is this something OakNorth would participate in?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I don't know about participate. It sort of depends. I mean, we're very lucky that we're very well funded. I think it depends. It depends on the opportunity, but I think we would generally see an M&A situation as a bit of a distraction. But I think that's because we're in a privileged position in that we're not being sort of forced to consider it. In that we've not got a limited runway where we kind of have to find a partner or something. So I think that that is going to catalyze things, as you say.
Yeah.
I think a lot of fintechs are going to find themselves in a position where maybe they previously thought, oh well, we've got 18 months to achieve profitability, achieve exit, whatever. Now they're like, actually, we're going to have to find someone to team up with because we can't quite get there. And a second round is looking challenging at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be.
What will be your advice to them in that situation?
So it's a tough spot, right? I think again, consider what you're really good at, and look for investors who sort of chime with that one thing. I think probably if my prediction for the investor landscape, and it's not a super huge area of expertise for me, but my prediction for the investor landscape is investors are probably going to narrow their focus onto things that they really understand. And so if you can find a niche investor who does the exact thing that you do and understands it well, you'll probably achieve better results than if you try to go for generalists and sort of blast things out there. I think in terms of looking for M&A targets, I think that's always a challenge, but I think culture is very important. Looking for people that have a missing jigsaw piece that your solution would be better, so the pie is larger than the sum of the slices, so to speak. I think that's really the magic that you're looking for. But I think in this kind of environment, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually take the time to do that research.
Yeah. I mean, just as we close, some of the reflections that we have is that COVID-19 has probably driven the most significant digital transformation of our times, right? So we've been looking at digital usage or digital channel adoption across lots of industries over the last 2 months. And in most places, they've minimum grown 30%, in some cases doubled, right? So groceries is a great example, right? Everyone is shopping online. So from our perspective, the fintech, revolution is absolutely moving forward, right? And from what you've described, lots of the things that you make available will be adopted. I think the headwind is what we've just been discussing. How many fintechs will be around to actually make this happen? How many people will strike the right partnerships early enough so they can stay kind of in existence? So as we wrap up, what is your outlook when you think about the impact fintech will have on the banking sector? What's your sense of how the story might play out, given all the crisis issues?
Yeah, I think it's really spot on what you said. I think there's been a tremendous acceleration of digital adoption and so on. And I think fintechs who are kind of going with that tide are probably going to do well. I think people who are not part of that narrative are going to struggle to get mind share. And I think partnerships are key. So if you're a big bank, looking for an injection of sort of dynamism, innovation, agility from a fintech could be very helpful in the current time. And I think that theme is gonna really dominate for the next few years.
Super. So thank you very much. We are going to, I think, wrap up here and switch to the Q&A stage. I've already started seeing questions coming in, Shawn, just to get your mind thinking. People want to know which sectors they should be focused on. Where's COVID-19 going to have a better or worse effect, right? So, that insight would be fantastic. The other one is people are trying to understand what kind of form of investment will we see into fintech? Will the use of, for instance, convertible debt massively increase given the difficult?
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.